Today, I'm uncovering the most intimate question that Jesus ever asked, and you will not believe what he said.
Excuse me, what?
Because it's so simple. The question is, let me try that again. Listen, stick with me today. You'll find out that question and why it's so important that you find the answer for yourself today on Church Door. Well, hey there, my name is Ian. Thank you so much for coming to be with us again today. Do me a quick favor and give us a thumbs up. That helps it shoot up in the algorithm so that other people just like you can also be blessed by this video. We also want to say to you, we're here every single Sunday morning at 11:30 Central Standard Time. So if you need somebody to pray with you, you need somebody to walk with you, just go ahead, reach us down in the chat box, or you can text prayer to the number you see coming up on the screen. Today, we're starting a series of messages based on the questions that Jesus asked during his ministry on this earth. And believe it or not, there are more than 300 questions recorded in the Bible that Jesus himself asked. Now, why is this important? Well, firstly, because Jesus is arguably the most important figure in all human history. So if he's asking a question, it's probably something we should be looking for answers to. Secondly, in order to find answers to life's biggest questions, you must first be willing to ask them. And Jesus was a master at asking the questions that help us ponder the most important things in life. Matter of fact, it was quite common for a great rabbi or teacher like Jesus to be a master at asking questions. It was known that the best teachers could answer a question with another question. This great tradition of question asking amongst rabbis was important because a great teacher knows this: good questions lead to great debates, which lead to better understanding. And we all want better understanding, right?
Right.
We live in a confusing world where there's an abundance of information, yet an attrition of wisdom. That is why in this series, we will aim to learn from the greatest rabbi of all time, Jesus Christ himself, who through his ability to ask good questions, brought wisdom that is still being digested 2,000 years later. The question that we're focusing on today is the most intimate question that Jesus ever asked. And you won't believe what this question is because it's so simple. Are you ready for it? Here it is. The question is, do you love me? At the Passover meal before Jesus was arrested and taken to the cross, an interesting conversation ensued between Jesus and one of his followers named Simon Bar-Jonah. This was the disciple that Jesus called Peter. As he sat with his followers, he told all of them that they would desert him. And in that moment, desiring to give a satisfactory answer, Peter jumps up and says, "Certainly, Lord, it won't be me." But Jesus kind of says, "Hold on there, bucko. Before the rooster crows this day, you, Peter, will deny me 3 times. And that's exactly what happened. I'm sure that this hurt and cut deep into Peter's soul. Like you and me, deep down in us, there's a desire to live an unwavering life, a life that is loyal to the good things of God. Yet we, like Peter, when the pressure of life hits us in a moment, we fail because we are flawed sinners. And it's no coincidence that this story revolves around the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, because ultimately, Peter's life is a reflection of ours. His story is one that we all can identify with, and is the very reason Jesus went to the cross. Jesus went to the cross for flawed people like Peter and like you and like me. Yet despite our best efforts, oftentimes we find ourselves caught up in our own brokenness, wondering, what have I done? Why can't I ever do anything right? The message of the cross points out in perfect clarity, we often don't do things right, but through the power of Jesus, we can find victory over our failure. Because Jesus didn't stay in the grave, he rose again. He demonstrated that he is God and he has power over death, over the grave, and ultimately our sin. On the 3rd day after his death, some women who followed Jesus went to check on him and found that the large stone that had been put in front of his grave had been rolled away. An angel of the Lord met them there and told them that he has risen. He is not here anymore. Then where did he go? Well, over the next 40 days, Jesus was appearing to his disciples on a farewell tour of sorts.
Bye, have a great time.
And one of the most interesting interactions that happened before his ascension was, of course, with Peter. In my mind, this interaction is like one of those pictures of a dog owner coming home to a absolutely wrecked house. And the dog has guilty written all over their face. Peter was well aware of his failure, and he knew that Jesus was just as aware as he was. And this was their interaction. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time. "Do you love me?" he said. "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." This scripture is full of great things for us to take away. And I have to say, one of the funniest things is the name that Jesus addresses Peter with in these scriptures. It's unique because in other scriptures, Jesus just simply calls him Peter or Simon or maybe even Simon Peter. Yet in these scriptures, Jesus calls him Simon, son of John. And this was Peter's name before he followed Jesus. This is kind of like a parent calling out a child's middle name when they're in trouble. When I was growing up, when I heard Ian Russell, I knew things were really about to get serious. In other words, Jesus was saying to Peter in this moment, I know you better than you even know yourself, buddy, and it's time for us to have a talk. Then he asks that question, "Do you love me?" Which we all know in this instance is a loaded question. Jesus was doing much more than simply soliciting an affirmation. In this moment, Jesus was teaching. He was showing Peter that the price he had paid on the cross was for him. And this is my first point. He was saying, I'm not done with you. Many of you are watching this video today. You don't even feel worthy to be watching this video. You feel like the things that you have done in your life have marked you with a giant U, which stands for unworthy. But on this Easter Sunday, the resurrection of Jesus, the one who died for you, is coming to ask you directly, do you love me? Because ultimately, I'm not done with you. Now, there is a nuance in these scriptures as well that can easily be overlooked, especially since we cannot see this nuance in our own language. But in the Greek, there's an obvious difference. When Jesus asked, do you love me? He says, do you agapeo me? Agape is the kind of love that scholars associate with the love of God. It's a love that is selfless, sacrificial, and unconditional love that seeks the good of others. But in contrast, Peter answers, you know I phileo you, Lord, which is a different love than what Jesus asked him about. So what is phileo love? Well, if you're good with word association, you might be able to figure this one out. And let me just give you a hint. It's not phileo fish. There's a city in the U.S. named after this type of love. Anyone? Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. So what Peter was saying was, Lord, you know that I love you like a brother. I cannot help but think that this has to do with his failings, that somehow he feels unworthy of agapeo love after denying Christ like he had. But Jesus didn't stop. He kept pressing in. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? He asked it 3 times, which makes it even more clear to Peter that Jesus was saying, I know you have failed, but the love I have for you is agape. It's a selfless, sacrificial love that is seeking your good. He was saying, Peter, I'm not done with you yet. Not only was he saying that, he was saying something else, which is my second point, which is this. I have a great plan for your life. Each time Jesus asked, do you love me? He gave Peter an action point in rebuttal, which is then tend or feed my sheep. During the ministry of Jesus, he often referred to himself as the shepherd to his sheep. Therefore, what Jesus was saying to Peter was, carry on my ministry. Despite your failings, my sacrificial love has covered your shortcomings. So stop counting yourself out and feed my sheep. So what does that look like? It should look like the love Jesus shared during his ministry. Jesus was always concerned with the lost sheep, which means his ministry was intentional to bring the good news of God's love to others. He was also concerned with having close intimacy, community, and connection with his followers. In John 10:14, he says, I'm the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. So when he asked Peter to feed his sheep, he was also reminding him of the importance of connecting his sheep in relationship, to embody the greatest commandment, to love the Lord with all of your heart, mind, soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus spent 3 years teaching Peter what it means to do this type of ministry. And through that ministry, that lives could be changed, that others would discover the greatest love, agape love, that God has for them. The scripture tells us that God is not willing that any would perish, but that all would be changed. Here's the truth. Jesus is asking you this very same question. Do you love me? Because he's saying, I love you. I have demonstrated my love for you by taking your place on the cross. John 3:16 says this, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, and that whoever believed in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. It all starts here with believing. Do you believe that Jesus demonstrated his love for you on the cross by sacrificially dying in your place and demonstrating his power over your sin when he rose again? If this is you today and you've never given your life to Christ, we have a team of people here that want to help you walk through that decision. You can reach out to us in the chat box, or you can text prayer to the number that you see coming up on your screen. If this is your first time joining us, do us a quick favor and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that every single time we put out a piece of content, it's coming directly to you. You can also help us out by going to rivervalleyrockford.org/give and making a donation there. Every single cent that comes in goes right back out to help people just like you take their next step with Jesus. Our prayer for you this week is that you will walk in the agape love that Jesus has for you, that it will flow out of you to your friends, your families, and neighbors. And not only will you be transformed, but they will be too. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Hope you have a great week. Be blessed. We'll see you next week.